Welcome, Mr. Secretary. One of the things that I want to point out as I asked you a question about the proposed funding is I've taken notice for the last 20 years. When I was sworn in 20 years ago, the local funding of school districts was 57% of local funds went to school funding. Today, in 2012, 2013, the funding locally is still 57%. State dollars have stayed basically the same percentages they've had for the last 20 years. So I guess my question to you is, the governor's proposing a 50% funding for education overall, and I got to be honest, I like that idea. But, Mr. Secretary, I guess as we get to those dollars, we're talking about state dollars now getting to 50%. Are you and the governor looking to exercise more control over local school districts since you will be picking up a larger percentage of their budget? Are you looking to pass down additional regulations, additional rules, and telling them how they're going to spend those dollars as we move forward?
Absolutely. So I wouldn't want to call it more control over school districts. However, part of what's being recommended in the budget and also the adjoining law changes, the school code proposal as well, puts into account a number of accountability measures. One, ensuring that the additional funding goes towards programs that are proven programs, that are scientifically based, and that focus on improving education for children. So one of the standards we're going to put in place is make sure it's spent on quality programming. Second, there are going to be specific expectations tied to the funding formula around student performance. And there's, I guess, a menu of options. I've highlighted some. But I think, looking at specifically improved graduation rates, looking at decrease in their dropout rate, looking at an improvement of literacy on and not just, the generic literacy. I mean, the governor has been very specific, and we have supported the movement specifically to say reading on grade level, so that it's really not ambiguous language in the sense. It's ensuring that kids are reading on grade level. And then he goes on to say, because we know studies show that if students who can read on grade level by the third or fourth grade have continued success throughout their adult years. So it's making sure that earlier on. Now, we'll have to provide some allowance for English language learners, for students with special needs, for students who may have high transiency, but there's an expectation tied into the additional funding that we invest in good programs and that we measure the outcomes of those good programs.
Mr. Secretary, also, one of the things I think is important for everybody to understand is that the only mandate we really passed down to affect the cost overall, major cost of school districts, has been the pension issue. Many of the things like textbooks and salaries, health care, contractors that they hire, artificial turf on football fields, things like tunnels for football teams to run on the football field, tickets to Hershey Park are nothing that the state mandates. And so I guess the concern I have as we move forward and we talk about 50% of funding, it's a question of 50% of what? I think taxpayers want to know is that as their state tax dollars are going to increase to provide that 50%, who's going to control what and those spending dollars? So comments on that?
That's a great point. And I think two measures that have been put in place, of course, it's the establishment of the investment that's being made to school districts. And there's a small allowance, which there's a small allowance of that 1.9% or whatever the Act 1 index at the time increases that school districts can use, towards negotiation, other costs. But the rest of that increase in the basic ed has to go towards those programs. He's also proposing some tax relief expectation in the sense that if school districts are going to tax their local community, that they utilize some of the funds that they've been saving up for, and that's where you get into the unrestricted funds that could be used in those ways. So first and foremost, he wants to ensure that we're paying for programs in the classroom. Second, he wants to be sure that our school districts are being good stewards of taxpayer dollars. It happens. If I sat here and tried to defend every school district across the Commonwealth, you'd have every right to kick me out of the room. The truth is, what we have to do from as we work to improve The investment we're making is ensure that we and our communities are getting the highest rate of return on our investment.
Mr. Secretary, the Department of Ed received a $41 million grant from the federal government with the Race to the Top, a K through 12 grant. I believe that the grant is set to expire on June 30th of this year, in 2015. Can you give us a status update on the progress of the grant and where it is officially, if it's officially over?
Yeah, so I can share with you. I'll definitely forward you the much more detailed analysis. However, we are asking for an extension to the Race to the Top grant. There's still about $8 million, $7-8 million out in school districts that has not yet been spent. So that's part of where the accountability measures are actually taking place. Since I've been here a month and a half, almost 2 months, when we realized there's about between $7 and $8 million still out there to spend on school districts. We have our team working with the school districts to ensure it's being used in high impact areas. But I'll get you a full analysis.
So there's still dollars to allocate yet.
There's still dollars to allocate, yes.
Okay. Mr. Secretary, also I guess kind of my last question is, you have a $400 million increase in the basic education funding formula for the upcoming year. I guess the question I have for you is, you and I both serve on the Basic Education Funding Formula Commission, and I guess I'm disappointed a little bit that the way the dollars are being driven out by Governor Wolf's proposal in education are not. I would have preferred to see the governor allocate those dollars based upon a future formula rather than the formula that he devised, which to me is very unfair to many of the taxpayers in Pennsylvania. Probably 400 school districts are losers in that funding formula that has been put out by yourself or by the governor and his staff. And so I guess why not wait for the Basic Education Funding Commission to come out with a report to fairly distribute those dollars based upon that commission's report?
It's a great question. And the governor's philosophy, and we supported the philosophy behind this budget. I shared quickly years ago when we started, when the state, the Commonwealth had to make reductions because of the overall, just because of reductions to the state budget. And we know that it was very difficult in terms of the environment at the time.
Let me correct you, Mr. Secretary. The state did not reduce funds.
Sorry, reductions to school districts were made. I'll keep it generic.
Yeah.
Thank you. So when a 10% reduction across the board was made, school districts that received 40%, and I shared that. So what ended up happening, if we anticipated that being, let's just say, a flat line, a flat foundation. Some school district reductions kind of fell lower than others. So we just kind of see it as a potholes, let's say, on a straight line. The governor's budget starts to fill some of those potholes proportionately. So what he envisioned this budget doing was creating a straight road or a straight foundation that will support the movement of the Basic Ed Funding Commission's work. So what he tried to do was establish equity within the reductions that have been made, and you're right, just across the board, fill those potholes in a sense that so that this year's budget will serve as a cleaner foundation for the work of the School Funding Commission.
I think my superintendents as a whole would argue that you make the hold harmless more difficult to deal with if the governor's formula goes forward. When we look at the hold harmless, which has been the one criticism that just about everybody has had universally. So I would say that the new funding formula only makes that worse, and if we're building on top of the current formula that the governor's proposing, that is going to be very difficult for this General Assembly to allocate dollars to overcome the hold harmless. So, Mr. Secretary, I thank you, and Chairman Adolph, I appreciate your time.